All right, I'm gonna do some talks on or a talk on Angela Davis today, and kind of what she and the Black Panther Party kind of did, and then kind of what she did for like criminal justice reform, specifically with bail in California. It's really cool, like if you study her. So I mean, like I got to the point I was advocating for something like 3 years, and people were just refusing to respond to their emails. And my next step was basically suing the crap out of them civilly in federal court, to have a judge say like, hey, listen, these are national nights of social work ethics. You need to respond to your emails, because Kyle's trying to advocate for a noble cause here, which is basically, to provide crisis beds, to prevent unnecessary incarceration and fatal overdose. And you're ethically obligated, according to Kyle, through National Alliance of Social Work Ethics or legislative ethics or anything else, to talk to him about this type of stuff, because when you don't, people die. I mean, that was the next step, and I'm still at that right now. But I'm like dealing with the state of Vermont saying that I'm not allowed to protest and I'm not allowed to put certain stuff in the media, and basically trying to keep me out of federal court is how it feels, by racking up all these violations and busy work and stuff, so I can't file a federal appeal or start the federal civil process. But I mean, like that aside, like I got to the point where it's like, well, I need to do something here. I need to do some type of protest or something to bring awareness to this. I've been doing this for 3 years. And in my mind, like there's no better example. There's no one that like exemplifies that, does the best, when it comes to social justice advocacy than Angela Davis. Angela Davis was a professor, a teacher, kind of like me. I mean, I only have an associate's, like I like doing case management. But Angela was a professor, a doctor, and she was into teaching like me. In my religion, Zen. Most of us are pacifists, by the way. And I'm just not okay with non-consensual violence or anything but fighting for sport, on home soil. But like Zen is teaching. Life is teaching. Life is learning and teaching. I mean, I'm a black belt. Life is learning and teaching in karate. But Angela was a professor, and she was into teaching. And some of the first legal action that she kind of probably was in cahoots with her staff was some type of affirmative action thing where they didn't give her the job largely because of her skin, because she was black. And that's kind of how they got there. I don't know if it was UCLA where she taught. That's where they got like she got her feet wet. Was doing that type of stuff. But if you understand the Black Panther Party, they were kind of like street gangs, and street gangs start in New York, in LA, because the police or other people or social justice agencies, whatever, food banks and stuff like that, aren't doing their jobs in impoverished neighborhoods. And that's what the Black Panthers really were. Was they basically were like community whatever agencies, NGOs, non-government organizations that do things like breakfasts and help kids learn, and basically promote security in their neighborhood, because the police weren't doing their job. And a lot of people felt persecuted by police. A lot of people felt like they were being wrongfully convicted and stuff like that. That's what a lot of what was happening with basically the Black Lives Matter movement of the Black Panthers in the 70s for civil rights. And what they would do is, bail was a serious issue. So if you got arrested and you were like basically innocent, like I'm saying I was, like, I mean, I slightly raised my voice. I don't know why I need to be seized, why I need to do 72 days detainments. I don't know why I need to do now a bunch of more jail time and clog up the Vermont state prison system or whatever, because I slightly raised my voice in a protest. But I'm alleging that I didn't do anything. I mean, if they wanted me to leave the grounds of the State House, all they had to do was ask. If Jill doesn't want me to, protest on the grounds of the State House, all she has to do is ask. But this is a constitutional issue. Like, I'm not going to stop posting about the transactions of government. It's unconstitutional. It leads to tyranny. We shouldn't need firearms to feel safe. We should be able to protest and put stuff in the media. But I digress. With the Black Panther Party, with bail, what happened? If you're wrongfully accused or you're being brought in, and you're in an impoverished family, then you can't get out. You're in jail and you can't get out. And jails are nasty places. Jails are actually worse than a lot of prison time. So a lot of jails don't have good time. It's just time served. So for every day that you're in jail, it goes off your sentence if you're convicted. And a lot of jails, it's just like, there's just unrest, and like people just like, you're not sure, you're not settled into a unit. It's like a prison kind of becomes home. So that's just a place where there's fights, and people do get shivved and stuff like that. And there's like like battles over freaking like there's battles over things like control of narcotics distribution and things like that. I mean, when I do jail time, I just play chess. I keep my head down. Now I fight for sport, and some people have an ego over that because violence gets them the trade. And eventually, I fight for sport. I really don't want to be in a unit where people are going to start crap with me. But I keep my head down, and I identify as gang affiliated because it is basically a social justice agency or community-based agency or an NGO called the United Blood Nation. And I'll lecture about them differently, but they run prison units and they do control the drug trade and stuff like that. But they promote good in their communities by encouraging people to be literate, by encouraging people to not turn their backs on their brothers and sisters by using stuff like crack cocaine. They do a lot of good actually, and they're really they're not into homicide. They'll defend themselves. They're not into expanding turf either, unless you educate yourself on your roots and read revolutionary literature and stuff like that. And what they do is if you rob people, if you're a predator, if you're a rapist, they'll use a razor blade because you can't deny people access to razors, and they'll cut open your cheek. And then everyone will know that person's a robber, that person's a rapist, that person's a predator. You should probably just leave them alone. They're a really cool agent. So something that I do too that identifies as gang affiliated or whatever as United Blood Nation when I'm in custody is if I file grievances, if I file formal complaints, if I go through the appeals process or whatever, and there's a real issue, like when they were threatening to inject me with medication, I told them, I don't need to be on medication. I don't want to be on medication. I'm going to fast. And on the 31st of every month, Bloods fast just to prepare themselves. So a hunger strike is one of the few tools that people have when they're actually incarcerated to promote social change within a prison. And what you do is you fast for 30 days, and hunger strikes are largely ineffective because after 30 days you can't do it, and you just become famished and you shut down, or you need to eat or whatever. So at day 31, if we're fasting as a prison, we riot. Our people riot. And what happens is you get time to have the peace talks, to have the collective bargaining, of time to hopefully enact social justice. And every day, we're gonna riot on 31 days. There is gonna be violence, blood is gonna be spilled. You guys need to address this issue of whatever it is that we're having for access to literature, or somebody in solitary confinement for more than 30 days. There's stuff that they would do, to enact social justice within that prison unit. It's a pretty cool thing. It really is if you understand what they're about. But that's just how I kind of do jail time to kind of avoid violence and keep to myself and things like that. I'm a pretty big guy. People normally leave me alone, but more or less, especially in Vermont, you kind of just become home. And in Vermont, their thing is, if you get in a fight, they'll charge you with assaults and they'll ship you out to Michigan for 3 years to kind of avoid violence and stuff like that. But I'm a strong proponent of no one should do more than 30 days in solitary confinement. If you need a unit for people that are prone to violence or something like that, that's fine. But if one, collective mind or whatever controls the unit, like if the Bloods control the unit, once they control that unit, there's not going to be violence there. Or if somebody tries to be violent, they'll put them in their place really quick. Something that's cool too is say somebody is, going against the unit or whatever, say somebody is whatever, you can tear up their paperwork. That's all you can do. So you can tear up the person, hey, let me see your paperwork. I heard you're a rat. I'm not a rat project. And you tear it up and you're like, yo, this guy's a rat. So they're bro, everybody's after me in this jail. So what does it do? It educates the person really, really quickly on how to navigate the prison system. How do I get paperwork? How do I not prove I'm right? So you know how to contact the clerk's office, you know how to get paperwork. You're well on your way to representing yourself. Next up, you understand the law library. It's a cool thing, man. It really is. It's really just intimidation with a lot of those guys. But long story short, it's what jail can do to people. And in California, what happens is if you're a first-time offender or something, you go and you need to defend yourself, you get in a fight, and you go to Michigan and Vermont. But in California, you stab somebody, you're convicted of murder. Now so you get charged with murder, it's a capital murder offense, now it's unbailable. So you go in and you get accused of murder, I don't know, maybe it's even a false accusation, or maybe you have to defend yourself because you're there, and jail's just a crummy place. And then what happens is suddenly there's a capital murder trial and it's an unbailable offense and you can't get the person out. and then the person is just a worse person, and they have to spend the rest of their life in San Quentin or something like that, like in the California state criminal justice system. But back here out east, it was Rikers Island, and then some of the jails and prisons in upstate New York, New Jersey, or Pennsylvania. But anyway, long story short, what the Black Panthers would do if somebody was charged with a crime is they'd have guns too, and they would follow. They're pretty cool, right? They would follow the police. They'd follow these people down to the local precinct, and then they'd bail them out, with community money or community funds, or whatever, and the person would be let out on bail. But there are certain offenses that aren't bailable, and capital murder is one of those offenses. So we have Angela Davis, right? And I don't know if she identified as a Black Panther, but there were these political prisoners that, she deemed that were stuck in the correction system for unbailable offenses or whatever. And that's a lot of, what the Black Panther Party was protesting, was to release these people like this. And after kind of the affirmative action thing where they established, black is black is black, and a professional is a professional is a professional, what happens is she starts staging protests and rallies and things like that. And you can see her encouraging college students at places like Berkeley and veterans that are coming back that are just, upset with kind of social injustice, like a lot of us are now. And she gives these speeches, and she comes out right off the beginning identifying as a communist. So it's like, okay, so you're a communist. What the hell is a communist, first off? So it's like, if you hear me talk to people about Black Lives Matter, it's like, hey, how many police do you know? Well, none. So you don't know any cops? No. Well, why don't you go meet some of these evil cops, bro? Like, there are good officers. Or like, well, I hate Donald Trump. It's like, well, do you know his foreign policy? Like, do you know what Donald Trump did with trade? Well, no. So it's like, well, I'm a communist. So why are you a communist? Well, I don't like well, why don't you like communism? So, what there is, and I'm a little different than Angela. I see the need for the McCarthy hearings when it comes to Russian spies in our government. I actually do. But like, what she's saying is, it very quickly in the 1950s does communism become the enemy based on hate speech, based on stuff put in the media. Communism is the enemy based on largely what the government's putting in the media. So by identifying as a communism, people start asking Angela in the 70s or the we're trying to try something a little bit different with the audio stuff. Like, communism doesn't even exist anymore. So it's like, Angela, why are you a communist? What's a communism? So you're a communist. How can you be a communist? I heard communism was a capitalist, structures basically set up like socialism, where there's kind of an authoritarian group of people that, control the majority of the wealth, and then people work for set wages despite their educational backgrounds or anything like that. How can you be a communist? And then she'd probably look at you and say, it's like, I don't know, how can I be a human being and not a Black person? So you can see the power of hate speech. You can see, basically the power of labeling someone as Black or an N-word, and how that changes how the public can treat someone like Angela Davis, who's a college professor. So suddenly, there's the word communism, and then what the government's putting in the media makes everybody think that communism is a bad thing without understanding what communism actually is. And that suddenly you understand, like, human beings are human beings, Black, white, indifferent, whatever. A human being is a human being. And she starts identifying as communism, so there's this strong speech of other people identifying as communists. I'm a communist, And then after that, after she starts spreading, being a radical communist or whatever, you hear kind of her supporters and people within those same social movements start identifying as revolutionary, as revolutionists. So, these people are committing treason, right? They must be. Why? Because they're identifying as revolutionists. They're saying, we're revolting. That by definition, if you talk about a revolution, is treason. And if you think about, federal law that's existed since basically the forefathers wrote our Constitution, people are tried on their speech and conspiracy charges. It's something that they don't really get in my case. No one's defined what a threat is or isn't. And my thing with firearm safety is, if I feel threatened, I can end your life, and it's justifiable homicide. It's a serious void for vagueness issue right now in my case. But, long story short is, they're talking about being revolutionary. So, this is conspiracy to commit treason just by identifying as a revolutionist. But then you talk to the person, like, why are you a revolutionist? Why are you revolutionary? And then suddenly, like, you understand by getting to know them a little bit better that they're just promoting social justice. But what they're doing is changing speech, and everybody's involving themselves in a conspiracy to ultimately overthrow the government because it's a conspiracy. So there's this wide ring of conspiracies to people that are just identifying as communists or social activists, to people that are identifying as revolutionists and are okay with basically, civic unrest and disorderly types of protests and things like that. And you see kind of these rings of the conspiracy kind of unrailing based on basically speech patterns and how people identify. And then there are other political prisoners and stuff like that, and you hear people talk about the difference between an inmate and a political prisoner and stuff like that, and you hear about the different jails and prisons and kind of what it does to people of color and how people are conditioned in prison and stuff like that, which is it's just a shame. You know what I mean? You stay in the community and you just, like once you're kind of socialized to that prison environment, you really just get used to it, like Charles. You do. But like, ultimately, like, this is how you see, Angela Davis's story transpire. As you see her as a teacher, a bright teacher, that is teaching things about social justice, and then you see people say, no, you're black, and then they're saying, no, legally she's a teacher. And then, okay, so you're communist. Well, actually, I'm promoting social justice and equality with things like wages. Well, you're a revolutionist. Okay, well, actually, I'm just kind of protesting some federal law here. I don't think federal law is okay or something. So like, you can see like the rings of the conspiracy. You can see kind of how her political platform develops. And then, ultimately what happens is Angela Davis gets arrested in a connection and charged with a conspiracy to commit murder and a few other things, because some men with guns that were registered to her go into a federal courthouse and take a federal judge hostage at gunpoint. And they take the federal judge hostage at gunpoint, and they ask for the release of political prisoners. So it's like, well, what is this? We have a professor, we have communists, we have revolutionists, we have radicals. We have all this type of stuff going on with this civic unrest, and we have people holding judges hostage at gunpoint, demanding the release of political prisoners. And then you pull all this speech aside, which is basically federal treasonous speech and federal speech to commit treason, and what you have is bail reform. You have people wanting bail reform in California. And Angela Davis gets arrested and charged with these crimes and held in, I think, solitary confinement, which is different than the Manson trial, where they let those people kind of talk and showboat and whatever, because they wanted to convince the public in that trial that they were not caring and kind people, so they could convict them of murder and do it harshly. Charles Manson, in my mind, wanted to get paid, and I think there should probably be some type of law in the books for getting paid for something like murder. But what happens, while she's a political prisoner, is there's already all this civic unrest for people being released, for what? For bail. And Angela gets arrested for what? The most unbailable offense, period, a murder. A conspiracy to commit murder. She's tied into a murder. So there's all this civic unrest, and she's promoting all this civic unrest, and kind of what happens is there's a bunch of pressure on the state of California to do what? To release a political prisoner, to start a revolution, to be communist and promote social equality and social justice and livable wages. Or for bail reform. And what happens is, I think there's a California penal code or something that gets changed, and, murder, conspiracy to commit murder becomes, or capital murder becomes, a bailable offense, situation dependent. And Angela gets bailed, and then she goes on the run. I like doing these talks, though. I mean, this is stuff that I've taken the time to educate myself on before I showed up in Montpelier with a safely stored gun. And I'll do one probably on the forefathers. There's a lot of stuff on my Instagram account, but I'm posting these kind of cool lectures and trying to work on my 20 minutes to half an hour kind of speeches and presentations, because life is teaching, I think, for both me and Angela. And she is who I looked up and respected to, and said, ultimately, if I get nowhere with the state of Vermont, I'm going to have to, do some drastic fucking protest or something to get people to look at why a quarter of our prison population exists, why people are reoffending at an alarming rate of something like 95%, why my clients are overdosing at an alarming, rate of something like 200 people per year. And why there's just this attitude of why, a criminal or an offender is anything but a person struggling to get their life back on track.